And I'd just like to acknowledge our sponsor for these sessions, Burke Bootloop. Enjoy.
Is that it? Am I live? Everyone, I'm Nancy from QUT and I will be the chair for this conference session today. Firstly, thank you to everyone for joining us on our first morning. So as this is a virtual conference, we understand that there may be technical difficulties, which I actually just experienced in my previous session. But if there are any problems during the session, please just click on the red headset icon and that will connect you directly with the live support team. For those that are on social media, there is a hashtag for this conference, which is hashtag TEM conference. And I also just wanted to point out that there's going to be a live Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So that if there's any questions, please just send them through via the live Q&A tab and we will address them at the end of the presentation by David and Danish. So now that housekeeping's out of the way, I would like to introduce our presenters, David Bruce, who is the Senior Space Planning and Development Manager from Monash University. And we also have Danish Acharya, who is the Education's Lead for Consulting APAC. So their presentation today is on a very relevant and current issue that we're all dealing with, which is 2020 has redefined the future workplace, or has it? So let's find out. Over to you, David and Danish. and look forward to hearing your presentation and sharing your research. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nancy, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Nancy mentioned, my name's Dinesh and I'm from JLL. And today, David and I are going to be having a conversation about the post-2020 campus experience with a particular focus on workplace. Over the years, JLL has been privileged to partner with Monash on a number of groundbreaking projects, including providing strategy and change support for the award-winning Learning and Teaching building, for the Sir Robert Menzies building, and also most recently reimagining campus experience in a post-COVID world for the campus in Malaysia. And today, we're going to be focusing on the co-design journey that we recently went on for one of these projects. So we're going to be focusing on process and partnership, and we look forward to sharing some of those insights with you today. So our focus will be on workforce and workplace experience in a university setting. David.
Thanks, Dinesh. So the big question that everyone asks is 2020 has redefined the workplace of the future, but we're asking, has it? So when we look at the work we've been doing over the past, we've been exploring the workplace in a lot of detail. And when we've revisited it, we've tried to see what the changes are. Back in 2019, we embarked on what we're calling a co-design journey to better understand our workforce before we went and redesigned the workplace. We wanted to design for the future of work in a university setting. So what we'll be doing today is exploring that journey and going through a few details of what we've discovered and trying to look at what we were doing in 2019 versus what we're now looking at in 2021 and seeing what the fundamental changes are between then and now. Dinesh?
So David, can you help us understand why there's been such a big focus on the future of work and the post-2020 campus for Monash?
It's a good question, Dinesh. And, the big focus on work is something that we're all talking about now, but we're also focusing on work before COVID, before 2020. And we were considering all of the changes because over the last 10, 20, 50 plus years, there's been significant changes in the workplace, in the workforce and how people work. But what we wanted to do now is we wanted to look at shifting from a reactive way of dealing with our workplace to a far more proactive approach. So rather than just having people come to us and say, we want to change our workplace and we address them on an individual basis, we're wanting to look at the workplace far more holistically. And that starts to talk about having a really clear strategic alignment when we're talking about a workplace. So whether it's pre or post-COVID, it's making sure that we look at the occupants that we're dealing with, but they're not our only customer when we're looking at the workplace. We're also looking at the faculty that those occupants sit within and the faculty business that has its own clear strategic directions and vision. But then more broadly beyond that, there's the university setting. And the university has clear objectives and visions and goals that it wants to achieve too. So aligning those key things between a university, our faculties and our occupants within them is one thing that we wanted to make sure we were going to address when looking at work and having it as a key focus. That then drives to the human experience. And clearly what we have now is pre-COVID, we were looking at health and well-being, so making sure we had spaces that were there looking after our people. We have dimly lit, poorly ventilated, cold, breezy spaces, and the new workplace can't be like that. But COVID's caused change things too. Again, things like ventilation and making sure we've got fresh air coming through. But then one of the really big things has been around cultural transformation and the change in work practices. Because when we have a look at the fundamental shift of higher education, is it's moved from what we call an individualistic focus, in where the educators served as a single arbiter of knowledge, and they were really competing with each other for research grants. And we've moved away from that and from our legacy buildings that were built in a time when that was the way that we were working. We've moved towards a far more cooperative focus in where cooperation and innovation drives the evolution of the thought process of our faculties. And what we're doing is helping the individuals and the faculties and the university address these major global issues that we're trying to deal with. Just like Tim was talking about earlier with sustainability, that then becomes another thing that is a key focus for us. It's a global issue, just like a pandemic. And when we look at sustainability, Monash is trying to get to net zero by 2030, and having our infrastructure support that's also critical as well. So there's a number of reasons why we've been focusing on work, and this is just a few key ones that we're going through. So Dinesh.
Thanks, David. You touched on it a little bit, but could you just elaborate on how COVID's changed things for the university?
That's a really good one again, Dinesh. And when we look at it in the changes of what we've been looking at because of COVID versus the changes prior, there's a lot of similarities. And what we might do is we might try and explore this in what we have coined the 3 Ws, breaking it down into 3 key areas of work, workforce, and workplace. And understanding that the way that we work and the workforce, the people within it, has a major influence on what the workplace needs to be. So understanding work and the changes that have occurred pre and post-COVID, obviously we've seen a lot of changes with hybrid work and hybrid learning within the university setting. And it's been an enormous change that we've all had to work through and adapt to. And the technology changes that have impacted on that have been enormous. And that's exactly what we're dealing with right now. And we've talked about technical issues and all this sort of stuff. It's just become common practice in what we're doing. And right now I'm staring at a laptop rather than hundreds of people and smiling faces. So it's a whole new world that we're dealing with in a work operating model. And we're also working flexibly. So the office used to be where we worked. In an operating model, if that's not just the workplace is also the home setting, or it could be a cafe, or it could be somewhere else. It's understanding what our working model is and how it's changed over time. And a lot of these changes were occurring anyway, but COVID has accelerated them. Then there's workforce as our next one, and that's the cohorts that we're dealing with, because the workforce is not the same, and we need to understand the differences between our workforce. So if we look at the cohorts of the academic and the high degree by research students, those cohorts have always worked relatively flexibly in the past because they have very clear metrics for monitoring their performance. So no one really cared if the academic was in their office or if they were at home, because it's a clear understanding of what they were doing that enabled us not to worry about that. And so professional staff become a different cohort. And I think that's where a lot of focus has been in the university setting. It's been around the professional cohort and understanding the workforce movements there. And that they are now starting to become very clearly demonstrating how they work and work well from home. And so therefore there's a lot more flexibility for them now too. So it's moving these settings and then understanding what the implication of how we work, the different cohorts, and the changes that that has on our physical workplace. And that's where we have health and well-being and the changes there, and obviously understanding that COVID's made some changes, but a lot of those were already in play. Then there's the density and mixer spaces, and that's probably one of the things that's starting to change a little bit more. And we know that there's less people in the workplace now. And having the metrics and the data to understand who is where has become far more crucial now than it's ever been before. So those technologies, managing that and understanding that have become even more crucial now. So really, what's changed because of COVID? I think the main thing that's changed because of COVID is the technology and how we embrace that technology to enable us to have that really clear understanding. And again, it all drives back to a clear understanding of how we work and who we are. And that then enables us to have a clear understanding of the workplace. Dinesh.
Yeah, great. I think that's a really fantastic overview. And in fact, what we'd like to do now is to invite the audience to share their priorities and what their immediate focus is on at the moment. So in just a moment, we will share a poll with you, and I have started that poll. And what we'd like to understand is, what is your top campus priority? Is it work? So as David alluded to, new workplace models in terms of work from home, flex work, new technology, hybrid learning. Are you focused on workforce? So understanding workforce needs, team dynamics, managing cultural change, facilitating learning and development, managing change? Or are you prioritizing workplace? So design elements that enhance the human experience or allow you to optimize space or improve sustainability and well-being. So I can see some results coming through. We might give you a minute and we'll see what the numbers look like.
So it's been really interesting, Dinesh, hasn't it? If you look at Monash, for an example, in 2019, we were so focused on understanding the workforce models and really deep diving into what the workforce is. That would have been our clear focus in 2019. With quite a look at how those operating models would be and making sure that the workplace we created was flexible enough. So workforce was a clear priority then. It was then the design outcome from there. But if we look right now from Monash University, I'd say we're really focusing on work and the operating models and the changes that has come through recently and what we need to do moving into the future. So, I mean, from a Monash perspective, I think we're probably looking at work. And looking at the poll, it looks like a lot of people are agreeing with that. So what are you seeing from JLL's perspective, Dinesh?
Well, so I couldn't agree more. I think we're very much now focused on the changing nature of work and supporting people in making that transition, leveraging new technologies and flowing on from that. We need to have a better understanding of the workforce profiles, which then allow us to create the building blocks for the workplace. So what I'll do just now is I'll share the results and hopefully everyone can see that on their screen. But David, as you alluded to, it looks like half of the respondents are very much focused on new models for how you work, including flex work, work from home, hybrid learning, embracing new technologies. I think that's a really interesting observation because probably a few years ago, I would argue that maybe the focus would have been on the physical aspect of the work environment. So just interesting to see how organisations are navigating that cultural shift. So I'll hide the results now and we can move on to the next slide.
Process. Dinesh.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to reflect on process. The reason being, so for this recent co-design journey that we went on with Monash, we were really challenged by the university to take a fundamentally different approach. And the university didn't want to appoint a consultant to tell them what the solution was, but rather they wanted someone to work with their people to define the opportunity. And for me, it was just a very unique brief that we received to market. And
so Dinesh,
just keen to understand your approach there, David.
It's a good question. So it was a clear approach that we went with there that was something we were looking for that was going to be different because we've gone through a lot of projects. And like everyone in this room, there's a lot of redevelopment projects of existing buildings or on new projects with new buildings. And we went through a clear process here that was to try and pull back to some really core principles that was not just a design process. We didn't want to come in and just simply design and have an outcome that was given to our occupants. We wanted to go through something a little bit different, and we wanted to challenge the people and our occupants to work with us through this process. And in doing that, we wanted to challenge our consultants out there to come up with something a little bit more innovative and a bit more creative than the standard design process. We wanted something that was going to enable us to have a very strong change management outcome, something very proactive. And by that, change is scary and change can be threatening, especially if it isn't done right. And I think we've all seen the outcomes of people not being happy with processes when they don't feel like they've been involved. And when something starts, there's often that threat to what that change is going to take away from an individual. So we wanted to make sure that we, from the very start, mitigated those change risks and had a process in place that wasn't going to be threatening and scary. It was going to be partnership-based, and that's the key word that we wanted to do. We wanted this design in partnership, co-design. So that was also fundamentally informed by our 3 Ws, our work, our workforce, and our workplace we've talked about. So looking at that, Dinesh, it'd be really good to get an understanding from you in the context of we sent out this brief. It was very big and bold, And if you can take us through how you responded.
Yeah, sure. And I think you touched on it, David, where, a large part of these projects is really about establishing trust, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school by saying, sometimes there's an inherent distrust between, academia and the space planning fraternity, because often staff feel like there might be an outcome that's already been predefined. And so for us, it was really important to that no pen had been put to paper and that we were actually going to work with them through the journey to understand what was most important to them, to define key guiding principles, and then ultimately to allow them to shape the design outcomes. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. I think the other key thing to understand on some of these large and complex projects is often there's diverse stakeholders. And, they might include the university, they might include different faculties or external stakeholders. And it's really important that those stakeholders are aligned around a common purpose and vision. And therefore, it's important to get those folks together in a room to agree on what's important and to hear from one another and, at least have some empathy for where other people are coming from. And, you touched on this element of partnership as well. And through the process, what we really wanted to do was to work with champions as partners. And, as you alluded to, sometimes if the project is not set up in the right way, there can be more of an adversarial relationship that develops. And we certainly wanted to avoid that. And then last but not least, I'd say, what staff do day in, day out is, they facilitate, great learning outcomes for students. And we wanted to work with our champions to facilitate collective learning. And again, we'll deep dive into that in just a moment.
It was a very interesting process, wasn't it, Dinesh?
Yeah, it was. And, given you were working with us throughout, I'd be really keen to understand from you, what do you think was the number one highlight from your perspective?
Okay. You're giving me one highlight from what was almost a year-long process. So, look, I've thought about this in a bit of detail, and I've thought, what was the highlight? And it has to be what we call our immersion learning journey. And I say this was a big highlight for me because it was a turning point from me going from probably the enemy to the friend. So when we're working with these 30 people at the start, they were very threatened and they almost felt like I was going to be taking away something. And they were looking at me like, you're going to turn our workplace into this sea of open plan, like a tele conference center. And it was this horror of thought of what we were going to be doing. And as we became clearer and clearer that I didn't care what the workplace was going to be. I cared about them and understanding them and developing a clear view of what they wanted to go into. And in doing this immersion learning journey, we went through best practice examples in Melbourne, university settings, in corporate settings, and then interstate as well. And all these best practice got them to say, I like that, I don't like that, this is good, that is not. And talking with them and showing them that I really didn't care. I only wanted to know what was going to work best for them to enable them to solve the world's greatest issues was where we got that turning point that they fully understood that we were here for them. And having that process was really important to me. So as a turning point, definitely my favorite part of it. Now I'm going to challenge you to give me one example of what was the best part from your perspective.
Yeah, sure, David. And, you know me, I struggle to be concise at the best of times. So I might be cheeky and maybe mention two. So for me, in the spirit of partnership, we were lucky enough to collaborate with a leading professor from Monash University, to align our process and approach to digital ethnographic research. And, I might just mention that, there's a really great opportunity on these projects to tap into the inherent capability that exists within universities. And, that was one of the things that we really wanted to do on this project. But the thing that was really valuable about this process was the champions could start to understand that we were taking the time to understand what was most important to them. We literally, worked with champions to reenact a day in the life, to understand what some of the touch points or pain points might be in their day-to-day working life. And this became really important for us as we started to develop, the brief for the future work environment. It was really critical also in helping us establish that trust and rapport with champions, because they could see that we were taking the time, to walk in their shoes.
It was great because it's also evidence-based, and there's nothing that an academic respects more than evidence-based research. So come on, let's have your second one, Dinesh. I think we're running out of time too.
Okay. Well, I'll speed through this and say, really enjoyed prototyping together with champions. Now, if you were to say to, space planners that we're going to let academics and professionals and HDRs design their own workplace, they'd think you're crazy, right? But because of the journey that we went on, which was all about, increasing awareness and understanding and learning from peers, by the time we developed mini briefs for our champions to respond to, they were actually really up to the task. And, for me, it was one of those proud parent moments where you could actually see, the nuanced solutions that had developed and how they responded specifically to the challenges that we had identified. And, I think, again, this comes down to trust, being able to trust that champions will do the right thing, as I said, we were really pleased with the outcome.
It was great. From having a dean, level E through to level A academics and professional staff co-designing together, it was amazing. It was one of the most incredible processes, and to see it actually transitioning through has been wonderful.
Yeah, great.
So I guess coming towards a wrap of this presentation, there were some really key things that we took out of this, and that was alignment is critical, and understanding that our customer isn't just the occupant or just the faculty or the university, but enabling us to align all three was probably the most successful part of this journey. And having that tick off from all of those customers has been what has enabled this piece of work to work for Monash through multiple projects from here. So it's been one of the key things. But why has it been successful? Because we've learned from people. We've learned from others. We've had that immersion learning. We've listened to people. We've walked in the academic shoes and those professional staff shoes. And doing that deep dive of understanding, that focus on work and workforce has been key to making sure we can get the right workplace design.
Great. Thank you. And just to reflect, to summarize, the co-design process we went on allowed us to draw on multiple intelligences. And, increasingly this is going to be important as the world of work is changing fast, as there's increasing complexity. The only way that we can solve these problems is by working together. So thank you. And we're keen to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, we really are working towards the unknown. We don't know what we're doing. We've had global financial crises, earthquakes, fires, floods, pandemics. What's going to come next? So, yeah, throw your questions to us, guys. We'd be happy to answer some.
Okay. Well, look, thank you very much, David and Dinesh, for that really quite insightful presentation. It sounded like the co-design process was actually quite a successful one from a university perspective. And so I've got just first of all, I do want to congratulate you on successfully doing the live poll during the session. I didn't actually get to see the results, but I was sort of just hoping that it was all going to work. So well done. Great work for that. I was actually particularly interested to know design work in the background with the various academics and the professionals. Has there been many opportunities, I guess, for you to implement any of these projects or apply to this particular process too? So that's a question for you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. Look, we actually have been applying this. So this has resulted in a topology for the university that's been very clear, and it's something that's been able to frame a lot of our discussions, and we've been using this on a number of projects where we've applied it. We actually haven't got to the point of having a physical outcome because COVID's slowed everything down, But we are at a point of some very detailed design on these. And again, it's transitioned through to a point where it's been very, very successful. So we've been able to apply these topologies and the lessons we've learned in a very, very clear way now. So hopefully in the future and the not too distant future, we'll be able to share some physical outcomes of that as well.
No, that sounds wonderful. And I guess, so are there any particular groups or faculties that that is a good candidate to start off that process with as well? I mean, I guess I'm not sure who out of the 30 people that was involved, was it across all of the university that the people were involved with?
Predominantly, we used it across 2 faculties, and it's an interesting one because it was the faculties of arts and the business school that were involved. And when we do talk about this, it's also around the cross-collaboration, not just within a faculty, but of faculties that helps create some real innovation and drive for new solutions. So having 2 faculties in this and having a design that leads towards collaboration between 2 faculties is a wonderful outcome. And we have seen these 2 groups work together in this process more than they would have ever worked together before. So again, another wonderful success to be able to see. And we haven't applied it more broadly to too many others at this stage, but we do intend to roll them out, and it'll be great to see how it applies to other faculties as well.
Okay, great. So if we've got a little bit of time, I guess just a very quick question for you, Dinesh. Given your area of expertise, I guess, how do you sort of see workplace experience evolving with all of this change that we're going through at the moment?
Yeah, so I think we touched on some of the elements of work and workforce and workplace that are changing. You know, I think the thing that's probably important for people to anticipate is that there will be ongoing changes, you know, over the coming few years. And, you know, one of the things that we thought very carefully about is how we could accommodate some of those changes over time. I think David also alluded to this point around, you know, constantly capturing information or data around how the workforce expectations might change or how building occupancy might evolve. And, you know, by users' needs. So I think they're some of the key elements, you know, in addition to what we discussed in the presentation.
Okay. No, well, that's great. So we are just a little bit out of time now. So thank you very much to both of you for presenting. So I guess I do want to point out, if there are sort of more questions for you further down the track with people as they actually watch this sort of later on, obviously they can either contact you via the Meeting Hub, or I guess reach out to you directly through the through any social media as well, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, Nancy. I can see there's lots of comments in the chat function, so thank you for those. And if there's any questions that we didn't get around to, we'd be more than happy to connect in the virtual meeting room or, you know, outside of that.
All right, wonderful. All right, thank you. Thanks again to everyone for attending this session. So I think next up we've actually got a little mini movement section for everyone to just stretch their bodies a little bit before we go on to another keynote speaker that's coming up, and that's told to Tufa in about 15 minutes. Okay, wonderful. All right, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
See you later.
Thank
Bye.
you. Okay, bye-bye.